Welcome to Beyond My Comic Shop. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Beyond My Comic Shop is a subseries of my comic shop history, featuring stories in and around the comic book world. This subseries was previously known as Flat Squirrel Tales, but following a crisis on Infinite Podcasts, all of my shows now live under the My Comic Shop History podcast feed. This installment is a double feature that originally aired as 2 episodes of Flat Squirrel Tales last season. First, I speak with 13th Dimension's Dan Greenfield and ReedPOP's Chris Dellando about our experiences on the convention floor. Then, I trade road trip tales with comic book creator Gregg Schigiel and retailer Chris Wilcock. This episode is very much a prelude to the upcoming Season 4 of My Comic Shop History, which will focus on the different players on the comic convention scene. This episode also marks the final Encore podcast. That's a nice way of saying repeat. My Comic Shop History, Beyond My Comic Shop, and My Comic Shop Book Club will all return with new episodes later in 2018. For now, enjoy this presentation of The Road to Con Season. I'm joined by 2 guests. Across from me, we have the editor-in-chief of 13thdimension.com, Dan Greenfield.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks. And
to my left, we have returning guest, Chris Dellando of ReedPOP.
Hey, man.
All right, so conventions.
Yes.
Now, you guys, individually and collectively, you have a ton of convention experience under your belt. Far more than mine, though I've been to my fair share of shows. But I wanted to bring you guys on and talk about them. I feel like I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with comic conventions. There are aspects of them that I like and things that I hope to get out of them. For example, the first few New York Comic Cons that I went to, I was really into collecting original art at the time, specifically getting sketches from artists and Artist Alley. So I loved, at the end of the day, having that sketch, but I didn't really enjoy the process of getting it, of dealing with the crowds and waiting in line and all of that. So I do feel like I kind of have that love-hate relationship. Kind of on that note, comic book fans, on an individual person-to-person basis, I like a lot of comic book fans.
Collectively, in aggregate, the worst thing humanity has to offer.
It reminds me of the scene in Men in Black where Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith are sitting on the bench after Will Smith has just been, everything has been revealed to him and he knows what's going on. And Tommy Lee Jones has this great line where he says, people are dumb. A person is smart, but people as a whole are dumb and the things that they believe and all of that. Not smart or dumb, but I kind of feel that way with comic book fans where, again, on that person-to-person basis, I love them. But when you put them all in a convention center, it can be very trying. The example that I always go back to is, this was either the first or second year that I went to New York Comic Con, and Warner Brothers screened the Wonder Woman cartoon, the animated movie featuring the vocal talents of Nathan Fillion and Kerry Russell.
Right.
Nathan Fillion could not be there, but he recorded a video message that they played for the audience. So as soon as his face pops up on the screen, that room of comic book fans just erupted. They were cheering so loud. To this day, I don't know what the man said. And it always bothered me because it's like, he's not there. He can't hear your adoration. Why not just hold your applause until the end so you can actually hear what he has to say? So that experience kind of encapsulates my feeling about
it's a good anecdote
about fans and just these conventions in general. So again, aspects of them that I enjoy and things that I love getting out of them, but just the thought of dealing with all of that can be kind of daunting. I mean, what sort of relationships do you guys have with conventions?
I mean, I have a terrible relationship with comic book fans. I mean, I've been a comic book fan my whole life, but I mean, as I mentioned before, I did PR in comics for 3+ years, and the way my anecdote used to be, comic fans don't know what they want. They just know you are not it. Like they have no idea what they want, but it's not what you're giving them. Right. Someone, I forget who the quote was attributed to. It used to get tossed around in the office. I think it might have even been Bill Jemas. But the quote was, if Marvel came out one day and said, we're going to give everybody milk and cookies, the first comment would be, I'm lactose intolerant, motherfucker. Like, and that's just like a perfect example of how comic book fans can be. And I, like you said, on a person-to-person basis, they're great. Love having conversations with them. Love shooting the shit and talking about books. But like when you get the hive mind together, it's grueling. It's tough.
How about you, Dan?
I tend to ignore it. I put on the blinders. I really do. I mean, I go in expecting the worst and hoping for the best when it comes to going into the big crowd. I know I'm going to be jostled. I know I'm going to end up dealing, you encounter people who are maybe not particularly socially adept. The cliches, they all exist for a reason, sadly. But for me, it isn't even so much the hive mind as it is just the sheer. It depends. I mean, look, we're talking about different kinds of shows too.
Right. Yes.
When we're talking about a New York Comic Con, frankly, it's a blessing and a curse.
Sure.
The blessing is the sheer volume of incredibly great stuff that you get to choose from. Almost to the point where you can't even choose to do it all. You really have to plan it out, but also what you have to deal with to get there. So it's exciting and it's intoxicating and it's all these great things, but it is also exhausting and infuriating and maddening, particularly as the crowds start to develop and you're trying to get from point A to point B. And it takes a long time to get there because you're just shuffling along and shuffling along and shuffling along. And the sensory overload can get to you after a while. But I still look forward to going to New York every year. Every year I'm always asked, repeatedly, people from, you coming to San Diego this year? You coming to San Diego this year? I'm like, I've done San Diego. I have New York. I'm good. I know I should go to San Diego at least every other year, if not every year. But at the same time, New York kind of fills the bill now. It's not the same show, but there's enough similarities there that I don't feel like I'm really missing out all that much. And frankly, from a comic book standpoint, going to San Diego, a lot of the information that you want, you don't have to wait to go to San Diego anymore. The publishers tend to release everything big that they're doing the week and a half beforehand, and then the panels become pep rallies. So that's changed. I used to go to panels a lot more often to get information, but now you pretty much know what's going in, and you get a bunch of, 5 or 6 different writers and artists up on a panel, and they can say only so much. So after a while, it really is for people who just want to hear the voices, and that's not something that's for me anymore.
Yeah. Well, you bring up something that I do want to get into in a moment about how there is this range of shows because, again, I think, people think, oh, New York and San Diego, but there's so many other shows. And I do
more of them now than ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But on the note of San Diego, so Chris, last year, just about a year ago, I followed in your footsteps and I attended San Diego Comic-Con as a reporter for Bleeding Cool, which you had done a couple years prior.
2013, yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Because I know we've never talked about it on the podcast.
It was great. I mean, I didn't do. To me, it was like, I went to San Diego for the first time with you when we went with the documentary. So that was 2011 probably. Yep. And I didn't go in 2012, and then in 13, I was like, oh man, I had such a good time in 2011. We had such a blast when we were out there.
Yeah, it was fun.
I wanted to go again, and getting tickets to San Diego Comic-Con is increasingly more and more difficult, and
even for creators too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The social media when that all happens, the fury of the creators, like I can't. I've been going there for 10 years and I couldn't go this year.
Ticket,
yeah.
And then not to mention a hotel, which is a whole other thing,
right.
And you have people who have tickets but don't have anywhere to stay, and then it's the point is moot. So I wanted to go again, and I happened across, Rich at Bleeding Cool looking for people to report on, and it's like, oh, this is an easy way to get a press badge, and it might lead to me getting some connections in the industry, which I had heard is a good thing to do. Lo and behold, shortly after there, I was hired to work at Marvel, which is a coincidence of epic proportions I still can't believe happened. Set me on a very interesting career trajectory. But while I was there, I just kind of took in the show. I really didn't have a whole lot to do from an assignment perspective. I covered a couple panels. Your experience is probably similar. You were on an email chain with all the writers and said, I'll take this panel, I'll take that panel. And I kind of just looked at the list and said, hey, I'm really interested in this stuff. I'm interested in that stuff. I can cover this. Nobody wants to do this. Sure. And I did a couple articles a day and that was that. And the rest of my time I spent taking in the show. I love San Diego. It's one of my favorite shows ever because not even because of the convention, just because of everything, the experiential stuff around the convention center.
That much is true.
It's the closest you can get to like Mardi Gras.
It really is. That was actually one of my favorite parts also, is that it really, unlike New York, because nothing can, even the Super Bowl can't take over New York City. Comic-Con takes over San Diego, and it really is great. And you're walking down the street in different neighborhoods and you're seeing signs of it. And that was one of my favorite parts about going. I agree. That is really cool.
It's because the convention center is right in downtown. There's all these bars and restaurants and nightlife, and you can leave the convention center at night and go out to a bar and literally bump into A-list celebrities because they're all out on the streets at the same bars you are, and it's a really cool experience. Movie studios and things do crazy activations at restaurants and diners and things. The story I like to tell is, I think you were with us when we were. It was me and Ralph.
Outside Nerd HQ?
Maybe it was we were walking down the street in San Diego one night, and we walked by a party in a parking lot. It was like literally.
No, I wasn't there for that.
It was literally just like a fenced-in, like 6-foot-high fence parking lot, and there was all these people inside, and there's a stage on the other side, and there's a band playing, and I'm like, that sounds a lot like Weezer. It's like, oh my God, it's Weezer. Weezer's playing in this parking lot in San Diego Comic-Con. Like, literally, it was just 12 months and 3 weeks out of the year, that is probably just a parking lot.
Right.
But that night, it was a concert venue. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. When I went that year with Ralph to 2013, the year I went with Bleeding Cool, we happened to luck into getting onto a party behind the convention center for Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which was the party game, the pirate game rather, and they had rowed a full-size pirate ship up to the dock at the marina right behind the convention center, and they just had this party on this pirate ship, and it was just the craziest thing. It's a big week-long nerd party, the likes of which you probably will never see anywhere else.
I thought you were going to tell the story of how Ralph Puma, our mutual friend, conned his way into the party at Nerd HQ by claiming that he was the heir to the Puma apparel empire.
The Puma sneaker empire, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it worked out. Shit, good for him.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember he told the bouncer, he's like, I'm Ralph Puma. And the guy's like, well, what does that mean? He's like, Puma, like the sneaker.
That's great.
Oh, only in San Diego Comic-Con, apparently.
Yeah.
Or the West Coast. That seems like a very West Coast thing to pull off.
I suppose. But, I mean, I have to say, the 2 times I went in 2011 for the documentary and then last year with Bleeding Cool, I'm glad I went. The 2011 experience satisfied me for a while, that I didn't need to go again. Yeah. And then similarly, I think I'm good for a while after this. The Bleeding Cool aspect was interesting. I agree. It's a great way to get to the show, and you don't get special access to panels or anything like that. But there is the press room, which is cool to be able to go to and sit down.
I didn't even go there. There's a press room?
Yeah. Yeah, and you have one in New York too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. and it is great to it's one of the benefits also of being media is that I can go someplace to charge my phone and sit down and catch my breath and, pay $5 for a hot dog.
As far as the reporting aspect, just to touch on this briefly, going for Bleeding Cool, I know people have different opinions on Bleeding Cool and its place.
I got hot takes.
Do you want to share?
No?
But, its place in the industry and in journalism, and that is what it is. But I was grateful to be able to go on Bleeding Cool's behalf and get into the show and all of that. But I had this moment where I was covering the Big Bang Theory panel. Right. So I watched the show, I enjoyed, and they were doing a panel. Nobody else was looking to cover it. So I was like, I'll go. So, just like you were describing. And the panel featured most of the writers, and Melissa Rausch, who plays Bernadette, she moderated. It was a fun panel. For Bleeding Cool and for a lot of these sites, I know it's important to be first, to be one of the first to, break news and all of that. And during the panel, they announced that Katie Sagal would be playing Penny's mother in the upcoming season, which has now just concluded. And I got sucked into it. I had my phone and I was emailing Rich and I was like, they just announced Katie Sagal. Because I'm thinking to myself, not even taking into account the fact that there were all of these other people around me. Who were all likely either posting directly to their websites or posting on Twitter or whatever. So the news was getting out there before I was doing anything. But, I got caught up in that moment of we're going to be the first ones to break this. And once that moment passed, it was a little disillusioned. I don't know, where I'm like, this is... I don't want to say pointless because I don't mean to demean the work that anybody does. And I know, again, for a site like Bleeding Cool, to be able to break news like that gets people to the site, that allows them to, generate more money in ad revenue. And I get it. But from my perspective, I'm like, this is not really my bag. What I really enjoyed, though, the flip of that, I attended a panel with Paul Dini where he was talking about his Dark Knight autobiographical graphic novel.
Right.
Which is a beautiful book. And
up for an Eisner this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't read it, it's really worth a read. And the panel was great. It was a one-on-one conversation with him. I actually met him briefly on the convention floor a little while after that, and I wrote a piece about that. And again, mostly just a summary of the panel. But at least with that, I felt like I was contributing something, like raising awareness of this book and writing about it. I don't know. I got more out of that than I did breaking the news that so-and-so was playing somebody's mom on a show.
Well, that you're speaking kind of the heart of 13th Dimension, which is what I do, because I'm not Bleeding Cool, and Bleeding Cool, to use the metaphor, is a major movie studio. I'm an independent, film producer, that sort of thing. I do my thing over here, and someone like me, and I have a couple of people who usually help me out at like New York Comic Con. There's no way I'm going to be able to quote unquote break news, because frankly, everything that comes out of those panels, like you say, everybody does it. And you're basically just dividing up whatever audience there is. So when I cover a convention, I often don't cover, there are some exceptions, because there are certain things that I cover that I know that my readers are really, really looking for and are really going to be interested in. And things that other more general interest websites might not be as interested in. So there's definitely that segment of, that I'll go for. For example, we did, with all of the Batman 66, Return of the Cape Crusader stuff last year. That's the heart of my readership, that kind of that retro cool kind of thing. That it's a term that a friend of mine actually, used for the website. And I was like, I'm going to use that from now on. That kind of thing that we do, a lot of, and that worked out really well. But mostly I'll go just to network, do some interviews here and longer term things, because again, when you're talking about a lot of these panels, the news is either already out there or everybody's going to put the same headline on it. And I'd rather find the one line that I can then feed off of for even maybe a month from now. I'll give an example. A few years ago, when Neil Adams was doing The Coming of the Superman. And so he was over at the DC booth, and, I love Neil. I've been, working with him and his family for years now. And so I went and I sat down with him, and we were talking about the project. And as part of the conversation, he just drops this line about how he was a better artist than Jack Kirby. So I put that one in my back pocket, and I said, I'm going to come back to that. But right now we're going to continue to talk about Coming with the Superman. And I understood what he was saying, and there was a context to it. But of course, it was the kind of thing that I knew that readers were just going to go, what? So I'll go for that sort of thing, but I'm not going to go chase the next, casting decision or that sort of, or so-and-so is going to be on this kind of book. But, that's where comicbook.com comes in, CBR comes in, Newsarama comes in, Bleeding Cool comes in. It's what they do. It's, and I'm frankly, for guys like me, I'm glad that they do it, because that's also how I get a lot of my information.
Right. And then, you can carve out your own place.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, of course, as we both said, one of the reasons we went for Bleeding Cool was that it was a way to get tickets to a show. That's something that, these shows are increasingly difficult to even get into. And of course, New York Comic Con, ReedPOP specifically, made news when they announced that they were no longer selling weekend passes, but instead they were just going to be day passes. So what was the thinking behind that?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't. As a fan, I would guess you want to give more people an opportunity to attend the show.
That was the stated as part of the announcement. They figured if you have 4 different groups of people going, ostensibly, rather than maybe the same people hogging the 4-day passes, and they probably found that a lot of people got 4-day passes, but maybe they weren't showing up on Sunday.
That's true.
Or maybe they weren't showing up on certain days, and they kind of figured out if they actually sell day to day, more people have more opportunity to get those tickets. And I can understand the frustration behind not being able to get a weekend pass, because what if you get shut out on Saturday? Your other option was to get that weekend pass and pay the extra, whatever. But it does seem more democratic to sell, by the day.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I'm curious to see if other shows, specifically San Diego, might follow suit at some point. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
I'm anxious to see, especially because where they're at and how they've grown over the past. It's been a steady growth for 10 years at this point, but especially in the last 3 or 4 years to see where they go, how they continue to grow, because I don't think you can even put any more people into that convention center. No. You really can't.
Which was also probably the thinking too, is that they can't add people, so they might as well open the pool up to more people that can get in.
On that note of growth, recently I was reading or rereading some of Mark Waid's original run on The Flash, in single issue form. They're among the final single issues that I still have in my collection. Mostly everything else is trades at this point. But one of the cool things about reading the single issues is you get to see the ads at the time, which they're always interesting.
Yeah, it's the best.
And seeing ads for comic conventions that were taking place, and most of them were in like hotel ballrooms or something like that. So they've grown so much. I mean, Dan, what was your first show that you attended?
In a hotel ballroom.
Yeah.
Actually, it's do either of you have siblings?
Yes.
Only child.
Only child. My son's an only child. Are you? You older?
I'm
or
the
younger?
youngest.
You're
yeah.
the youngest. Okay, so then I have an older sister. She's about 4.5 years older than me. So you know that there are certain things that the older child brings into the house. For our situation, of course, typically she brought the music in. She was teenage girl, and I of course followed suit. So whatever she had, I listened to, and we were a big Beatles house, and we there was a Beatles fest. This was 1979, and just like it sounds, it was basically a Beatles convention. It was this hotel in New York City, and Paula convinced my mom to take us in, and so we went in. I think it was like a Friday night, but we go to this hotel, and we're all excited, and we by mistake get off on the wrong floor, and on that floor was a comic book convention.
That's great.
Now my eyes. I probably sprained my eyelids. They popped wide. I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, Ma, can I go take a look? And she's like, Daniel, we're going up to I'm like, no, I gotta see this. So, my mom was pretty cool. So I go over to look inside, this open door. And sure enough, there's like this room full of just comic book stuff. And I turned to her and I'm like, Ma, please, you gotta let me go. And she's like, Daniel, we're really here for Beatle Fest. And, we didn't have a lot of money. And I'm like, no, please, I'll meet you upstairs. I'll be, I'll be okay. She's like, okay. So she gives me a couple of bucks for whatever the door, cost was. And she gave me a little spending money, which was, I think, like, my memory is like it was $10, which I'm like, that's all. And of course, $10 in 1979 was pretty good. But she's like, look, this, you take what you can get, kid. So off I went, and I went in, and it was a life-changing experience. It was my first comic. I didn't even know something like that existed. You're talking about a time when comic book stores were only starting to proliferate. This was still a time when, the 7-Eleven, the mom and pop newsstand, the stationery store, whatever it is, still had comics. This idea that you can go into this one place, it was like going to Oz. And I, and since I only had a couple of bucks in my pocket, I even remember the first comics that I looked at there. They were 2 Batman issues from the 60s. I was just starting to become a collector at that point, as opposed to just a reader or a kid who just got some comic books. And, when everything was said and done with, I went back upstairs, met my mom and my sister back up at Beatle Fest. And I'm like, I got to go for one of these for real. And so the next time there was like a creation convention in town at the Hotel Pennsylvania across from Madison Square Garden. And that was like the first time I really went and spent an entire day. And, ever since, I've been going on and off for, however many years that is, 30, 40 years.
Do you have an estimate of how many shows you've been to?
No, because I don't know, because I've been going to New York Comic Con forever. I've been to San Diego. I'm friendly with, as when 13th Dimension started at the same time as East Coast Comic Con, which, the guy who I started the website with runs East Coast Comic Con, and he and I, used to collaborate on stuff. We're still friends and everything, but he went his way and I went my way, because I really found that I wasn't really that interested in promoting conventions, and he wasn't really that interested in being, in publishing. But, between that and then even the shows like the Big Apple Con and all the shows that have changed their names over the years, I've lost count.
Speaking of East Coast Comic Con, like I said at the top, you guys have been to far more conventions than I have. Again, I went to New York, I think 3 times, San Diego twice, Undiscovered Realm, right in our backyard here for the 2 years.
Which is a nice little show this time.
It is, yeah.
It really grew. I liked it.
Exactly. Yeah, it really did grow nicely, and I'm excited to see what the third year might bring.
Right.
But that's kind of about it. And then last year I went to East Coast Comic Con for the first time. I enjoyed it a lot. Going back to what you were saying earlier about the range of shows, I thought it was a very nice balance between, maybe a tiny show where there's not enough and a show like New York or San Diego where there's way too much. It was a nice mix of, you had your creators, you had your vendors, you had your panels. there was enough that you could fill a day exploring, but not so much that you were just totally overwhelmed.
You're
It was a
talking about
nice
East Coast,
a nice mid-range show, I thought.
Yeah, it is, and it's grown a lot too, because this is a show that started in a bar in Asbury Park.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was originally the Asbury Park Comic-Con, and then it grew very quickly, and then went into a hotel down in Asbury. Long story short, there was also New York Comic Fest, which was at the County Center a few years ago. Ultimately, it all ended up at the Meadowlands as East Coast Comic Con a few years ago. Next year, it's actually going to be a 3-day show for the first time.
That's
Oh,
great.
cool.
Yeah. And the one thing that because the guy who runs it, Cliff Galbraith, is a comics artist himself, and because he knows a lot of people in the industry also, one of the things that he was able to do in getting the show started was, and I was able to help out a little bit early on also because of people who I was meeting through 13th Dimension, was getting good creators and getting really good guests. I mean, at New York Comic Fest, we had Scott Snyder and Mark Waid that first time out, and since then, we built upon that both with old school folks like, Neil Adams, who I mentioned earlier, but also really hot names today, who were there. Yannick Paquette was there this year, for example, and Arthur Adams has been there, and, people who have filled that range from people who were working in the early 70s and late 60s to people who are working now. So that's been a big deal. But you're right about that middle ground, is that you can walk from, throughout the entire floor and not feel overwhelmed. New York Comic Con, on the other hand, there's no competing with New York Comic Con because it's a behemoth for all of the good and the bad. But I do like going to some of those middle shows because you do get to kind of breathe that more comic book air sometimes than the more general multimedia kind of experience that these larger shows do now.
Yeah, and I think it depends too. This was something I wanted to get into as far as what you're really looking for out of a convention, right? So because there are plenty of guys within the alternate realities group who they like going to shows, but they like the smaller shows because they're mostly looking to dig through back issue bins and buy dollar books. They're not necessarily looking to see the pilot of Riverdale early, which I did at San Diego. And it was great. But, again, if you want that experience, it's there. But yeah, there are other shows where you can kind of, pursue a slightly different path. I mean, so like for you, Chris, more from the fan perspective, I know you've been working these shows for a while, but just as a fan, I mean, what sorts of things draw you to a convention? What are you looking to get out of them?
I don't think I was necessarily looking for anything when I first started going to these shows. And New York Comic Con was actually my first show. I went 2007 was my first year, which was their second year. They started in 2006. I had been going to comic shops forever, and having that experience and that camaraderie and that community. But it wasn't until I went to a comic convention that it really opened up for me, and I said, wow, this is like a thing. This is bigger than me. There's more people that are into this than I might have even realized. I mean, it was like before social media had really taken off. Right. I mean, it's hard to think about a time before that.
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's funny you say that. I remember, I think it was my first or second Comic-Con, and I forget which cell phone I had at the time, but there was an email that I was waiting for, and I was trying to get on the internet and to use my phone to check my email, and I was like, I couldn't do it. It's amazing, and not that long ago, really.
No, because the Wi-Fi at the Javits sucks. Actually, you could still have that problem even now.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Long story short, I mean, it wasn't until I went to a comic convention that I decided I wanted to work in comics. That was the decision, was going to that eye-opening, eye-popping experience and seeing all this stuff and all that multimedia. But to get back to your real question, I think it is the opposite of Dan. It's all that other stuff. It's all that TV and that movie and that glitz and that glamour, because we're comic guys. Comic guys by nature, it's a dingy fandom, and I love that about it. It's in hotel ballrooms, it's in dirty comic stores, it's digging through dusty old books. So to see the intersection of that with this Hollywood gleam, especially 10 years ago when it was really at the rise. I mean, it had happened a little bit earlier. I mean, San Diego was still growing and growing, but to see it, to see the intersection of our comic fandom with this rise of Hollywood, and now I mean, you can't turn on a television and not stumble over 5 live action superhero shows that I can't even imagine having when I was a kid. And now there's just so much of it, I can't even consume it all, and I'm just like, oh, I can't watch it. So it's literally the exact opposite of Dan's experience, but in a good way. I mean, there's something for everybody at these shows, which I think is cool, and I'm grateful that now that I've gotten to work on them, and I'm grateful that I get to continue to work on them, because I really do genuinely hope I get to provide that experience for somebody else.
It's what I actually enjoy going to Modern Show now. It's going to sound quaint, but I actually like just to go shopping. I really do.
Oh yeah, me too.
I really do.
Yeah,
I mean, I will spend, I'm always, whatever I'm doing there, whether I'm doing interviews or whether I'm, meeting people for a coffee or doing whatever it is, I always am, I'll schedule the day, and I'll always, my return is go back to the floor to go shopping. And I save the money up for, over the year to make sure that I have enough in my pocket if I want to make that big splurge. If there's an old Golden Age book that I don't get to see on a regular basis, and maybe I don't want to buy it online because I'm not sure what it's going to look like, or even finding that surprise book, like at East Coast Comic Con, not this past year but the year before, I just happened to be walking by a booth, and it was kind of slow and things were winding down, and sitting there on the wall of this one stand was a really, really nice copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 33. This is the famous Steve Ditko cover with the final chapter with the machinery.
Sure.
And I looked at it and I saw the price, and it was $45. And it was, I'm telling you guys, it looked like it was off the rack.
I just jumped out of my chair.
Right, you did.
Like,
You actually physically jumped out of your chair.
I would have bought that in a second.
Right, and I did. And the guy who's a dealer, I know the guy, so I said, if I open that up, what am I going to find missing? And he says, nothing. He says, fine. I'm like, 45. He's like, yeah, take my money. And I bought it right then and there, and it was my buy of it made the whole weekend. And and it's just because for those exciting moments of finding that thing or seeing that, I love that. I still love that thrill of the hunt that comes with coming with a comic book fan. And then when you go to a New York Comic Con, it's an abundance. I mean, there's just tons of it. And so that's really, really cool and a lot of fun. But again, for me on a more professional side of thing, it's also the networking and all that stuff I like to do. I just found that after a while, and you made the point just now, Chris, about social media and how it's changed things, that before that, those panels used to make news. And this was even before I was doing 13th Dimension. I mean, as a fan, I would go to the Batman panel every time because they would make announcements and you'd get excited and yay, cool, something's gonna, and you'd kind of parse the words and all that kind of stuff was a lot of fun. But now it just, it doesn't hold that, allure to me. They do make certain announcements, but even now everybody will have it within an instant, and then the creators can say, and it's going to be great. And that's all they can say.
And you're press too, so you know how it works, and I know how it works from being on the other side. You have that stuff ahead of time now.
Exactly.
I mean, the announcement is ready to rock and roll in your hands and in the CBRs and of the world's hands to just hit publish as soon as the panel starts.
There are embargoes that go on. Like you'll get wind of something a week beforehand, and they'll contact someone on one of the companies and say, hey, listen, I'm interested in that. What can we do now to prep for it? And they'll say, okay, blah, 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 blah. This is what I can tell you. And then I'm ready to go, boom. And I don't have to be in the building to do it. And that has changed things. So the experience that I have, and I don't mean to sound jaded or pampered or anything like that. It's just that why I go to a show has changed. And the interesting thing about it is that the reason I go to the shows more now on a personal level is more like the reason I went when I was 15. Which was because I want to go and check out really cool comics, and that in itself is a really cool thing because it's still about comic books for me.
I love hearing about, your experiences generally, but especially Dan, your that earliest experience at a time, as you said, when there really weren't that many comic shops and they weren't in abundance. So that was your only opportunity to be in a place that was dedicated to selling comics. Like
it was
amazing.
The Emerald City.
Yeah.
It really, really was. It was, and not to be sacrilegious or anything, but you did feel like the skies had opened up and a light shone down, and there was this special place. And oh my God! And even from a very early standpoint, I learned how to work the room and figure out, don't buy the first thing you see, but don't make sure that it's so rare that you might it might be gone by the time you get back, and how to walk that line, and
Yeah,
how
don't
to
be a flat squirrel.
Right, exactly. How to how to haggle properly, and all of those things that you learn, and the fact that you can get a deal on almost anything that you buy. But when I started going to New York Comic Con and going to those panels, that was really, really exciting. So I don't want to knock that down for your listeners who are into that kind of thing, but just on a personal level, I still enjoy, and I like to carve out that part of the convention that kind of speaks to that, that kid me that really reminds me of why I love comics as much as I do. So it all started from that show that I got off the wrong floor on an elevator, when I was 12 years old.
Yeah, these turns that you take that take you down a path.
Exactly.
Going back, though, to how much you enjoy shopping, you probably are able to accomplish more than fans who are interested in panels or getting original art. Because I've talked about this on the show before, I think, on the other podcast, but I killed a whole day waiting for a piece of original art, a Superman piece by Francis Manapul. Right. And it's great. It's hanging up in my bedroom. I love it. It was worth it. But that was my whole day.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of patience.
Yeah, now we get to talking about the dark side of conventions, which is the lines.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
Well, but even with the shopping, you got to come in, you have to dress for combat. In that, you just have to go in knowing you're going to be bumped and jostled, and that you're going to have to be patient, and you're going to have to wait for the guy who's spread out across 4 or 5 long boxes with 3 different lists, and he's taking his sweet ass time, and you just want to sneak in there and see what he's got under the Detective Comics area that you just want to poke into. And so there's that kind of, weirdness that enters into it.
And you got to navigate around all the people, and you got to navigate around that giant guy in a bumblebee costume who's like on stilts, and it's just like, why'd you even bring that?
Yeah. There's that one guy who dresses up as Man-Bat every year, and he's like 8 feet tall, and it's just with his gigantic wings. It's
he's got to stop every 5 feet to take up.
Because everybody wants a picture.
He's got to do the wing thing.
Right, the wing. Yeah, and so you just don't want to get caught behind him. It's like getting caught behind a school bus in rush hour.
There are thousands of people who go to New York Comic Con every year who just have pictures of the side of my head because I just walk in front of people's pictures. Like I'm just like, I got places to go. I gotta get through here.
Although one of my favorite things to do at New York Comic Con every year is actually to go up to the cosplayers, because I'll pick out like 13 of them, because we count in increments of 13 at 13th dimension. It's total shtick, but that's what we do. And just ask them, like, what do you do when you're not doing this? And just get the basic answer. And it's always interesting to see the cross section of people who, and it's everything. It's everything that you can imagine.
Yeah. What are some of the most interesting ones you come across?
Yeah, it really is cool. It's just, and it's interesting because it's so mundane. It's not like a neurosurgeon, rocket scientist. No, it's office worker, student. It's, a construction worker, it's teacher, it's administrative assistant. It's just the fact that and that's the part where you were talking about before, where, the intersection of the worlds now between comic books and movies and television is that through cosplay, you see a lot of it. And it's people who are really, really passionate about this in a way that I never, it's just not my thing. I'll wear my t-shirt. I'm wearing a Batman t-shirt right now. I wear them every day. But I'll just pick what's my favorite t-shirt, and that's what I'll wear at New York Comic Con this year. But I don't think about, dressing up. It's just not my thing. But I really admire the courage of the people who do it, and the commitment to some of those costumes. And then when you realize that they are just like you and me, they're just anybody. And there's something really, really cool about that way that fandom manifests itself.
It's
amazing.
Does
not compute. It just does. It does. I can't understand it, but I can see how someone getting into this world of fandom could go down
it's
that
transformative.
road.
And I find it endearing. I really do. I love it. And it's one of my favorite parts of going, just simply to see, and particularly because some people really take a lot of care with their costumes, and the level of artistic detail that goes into it is really impressive.
So I want to shift a little bit and get back to maybe more the practical side, the tactical side. We've talked about how grueling a convention can be. At San Diego last year, I overheard something in the men's room that I think summed up conventions pretty well.
Wow.
Someone walked in.
That's a segue.
Someone walked in and said, "Is this the line for the urinals?" And it's like, no matter where you go, you're waiting on a line, at least at those big shows. So I guess my question for you, do you guys have any techniques, any survival tips, any something that's in your backpack that you always have with you? What are some of those things?
Hand sanitizer.
Yes.
First and foremost, I will have 2 or 3 of them just in case, because it's disgusting. On a really hot, by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday at New York Comic Con, everybody's moist. It's nasty, and
Vile.
It can be bad. And not to knock it, not to tell anybody not to go or anything. It's just be prepared for it. You just have to set your mind to it. It reminds me of a friend of mine, an old college roommate, who used to say whenever he'd go out to a club, he always said, I think I used the term before, dressing for combat. If you're not cosplaying and you're not there to wear, don't wear your favorite, pair of shoes. Don't dress comfortably. Wear shoes that are comfortable. Make sure you do stop to actually eat something at least halfway through. Make sure you have something to drink, whether it's water. Stay hydrated. I mean, I know I sound like your mother,
It's
but
good advice,
it really
though.
is
Yeah.
good
It really
advice.
is.
But the thing, and do everyone else around you a favor and shower before you come, please. But I know that's playing to an old stereotype, but it still exists.
Well, at PAX a couple years ago, Axe was one of the sponsors, and they gave out Axe body spray because everyone smells so terrible at these shows. That was their giveaway.
Well, it's San Diego. When I was there, one of the companies was giving out underarm deodorant.
Yeah.
It was I think it might have been Mattel, because it was Masters of the Universe brand deodorant. It was hysterical. But the other thing is that, besides just the sheer physical survival of it, it's the mental survival. Understand going in that there is a chance that you will not get to do everything that you want to do. Don't let that ruin your day, because especially if you're a first timer or a first timer at a really big show, there's a chance that you don't understand just how difficult it is to get from point A to point B. So have a plan. Check out the programming ahead of time. Make your schedule. Figure you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do the other thing, but be prepared to give something up, because sometimes you have to do that, and you just can't get to do everything that you want to do at these massive shows.
Yeah, that mental stuff is everything. I mean, you went to San Diego twice. I mean, when I went the first time, I left devastated because I didn't get to do literally any of the things I wanted to do.
Prioritize. It's really important.
And then the second time I went, I just said to myself, like, it would be cool if I get to do this stuff. I'm probably not going to, so just don't get into your head. Don't get fear of missing out. Don't get any FOMO about it. You're probably not going to get to do any of it. So just be prepared for that. When I went the first time, some conventions clear the rooms out, some don't, which is a big deal, because you get in line way ahead of time for a panel that you want to be a part of. And I remember, like, number one on my list of things to do when I went to San Diego that first time with you was I wanted to see this community panel, the show Community.
I remember.
Do you remember this story? I don't know if I ever told you this story though. And the show was going into, I guess it was going into its 3rd season or maybe its 2nd season, and they had the whole cast there. And right after that, it was at the Hilton or the Hyatt, one of the hotels that flank San Diego, in one of the big ballrooms. And right after that panel was a Joss Whedon, like, one-on-one panel. He was just going to be there, and he was going to be shooting the shit for an hour. And everyone went to the room early, like first thing in the day, and just sat in the room all day because they wanted to be here for this Joss Whedon panel. And so I got in line for this community panel like an hour and a half early, and I'm like, oh, I'm totally going to get into this thing. It's going to be great. And of course I did not. And I'm stuck sitting outside in the hot sun.
Yep.
The line extended all the way out. And it was very upsetting, but I made some friends while I was in line. So there's that. Dan really covered the physical and emotional aspect of it. But as far as like the dressing for combat thing, like, bring a backpack, because you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff you're going to want to carry around. You're not going to want to carry it around in either the giant Comic-Con bag they give you, or bring an empty bag.
Yeah, if you do bring a drink, if it's raining out, do bring your umbrella. But if it's going to be a sunny day, don't bring for every, I know they're not fashionable, but cargo shorts are great for a convention, or cargo pants, because you get extra pockets. I mean, it really is. It's like dressing for combat.
I wear a lot of skinny jeans. Don't do that.
Yeah, right. Don't wear uncomfortable clothes. Yeah. But that stuff is heavier than you think. You put a couple of trades and a couple of bags and boards and,
all day it adds up.
It adds up.
5 pounds feels like 50 by the end of the day.
And if you're going to go for, into Artist's Alley, because that one artist is going to be there and you want to make sure that you have a chance at getting a commission, make sure you understand that person's schedule, how popular that person is, whether you should go there first thing. And the thing I can always stress is really make that priority, is figure out the one thing that you really, that it will make your show. And if you make your show about that and then fill in the blanks after that, then it makes it easier that you could focus on the big stuff, know that you're going to get this, or at least understand that there's a better chance if you focus on the one thing. And then at least you've gotten the one thing that you're happy with, and everything else kind of can fill in. But don't expect to get 5 great panels in, or all this kind of stuff. You have to be realistic.
Well, I hope listeners take all of that advice to heart. It is great advice.
Oh, also, wait, one last thing. These are very common now, but I remember being one of the first people at conventions that had them, but like a portable battery pack is like do or die now, because you're going to be standing in line for a long time.
I'm glad you brought that
multiple times. And what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to take your phone out. Your phone will die.
Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is definitely very handy. As far as the dressing for combat, this always makes me laugh. One of the years I went to New York Comic Con, one of the guys from Alternate Realities, Delando, I don't know if you know Roby.
No, I don't think so. Maybe by face.
Maybe. But it was, I think, his first time there. He's more of a casual fan or convention goer, but a little too casual. I ran into him on the convention floor. He's in flip-flops.
Yeah, forget that.
No backpack, and nursing a hangover. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is not how you go to a comic book convention.
Actually, I envy guys like that, because I wish I could be that guy, but I'm just not, and I wouldn't recommend, unless you're naturally that way, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way either.
No.
Sundays are particularly brutal, because Saturday's usually the night that everyone at the con go, like the creators and
because that's when Artist Alley is hungover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sunday is particularly brutal for that.
Yeah.
As far as the waiting, though, I'm at the point now, and this is not to, for anyone who enjoys waiting in line and loves getting into those panels, like, right on. I'm at the point now, I don't know that there's any person or anything that could be said that would get me to wait for hours. Period. I don't know. Even my favorite thing, like even if they were doing a Smallville panel, a Smallville reunion panel, my favorite show, I love it. But if I had to get in line at the crack of dawn, I wouldn't do it. Especially since it will be covered and perhaps even filmed, and I'll get to see it some way or hear about it. It's like, I don't have it in me.
There are a few things that would get me to get in line for something, like a very scant few things. But as I've gotten older, my time is much more valuable to me, and I don't have the effort or the energy to just sit in line all day. When I told that story about how I went to that party on the pirate ship out back of San Diego, and as I'm walking, there's a pathway that goes around the back of the convention center, and you walk along the marina, and the length. If you've been to San Diego, the convention center is huge. It literally takes 10 minutes just to walk from one end to the other outside on a straightaway. So imagine when you're inside and you're jammed in the aisles, but walking on the back of the marina, and it's as far as the eye can see down are people in sleeping bags, just laying in sleeping bags, waiting to get in the next morning to the Hall H stuff, like the Marvel panels or the Studios panels. And it's just like, why? That stuff's going to be online in like a month or two.
It's not only just that they're going to be online. You don't actually necessarily know what you're going to get, because one of the big lines, think about what you just described. I saw the same thing. And you know what they were online for the year I went to San Diego? The preview for Green Lantern. So you talk about a lesson.
Yeah.
It's a real roll of the dice.
Yeah, and we considered it, because at the time I was like, oh, that's awesome. They're going to have a Green Lantern movie. Who knew what we were in for? But that's also what you're dealing with. You're dealing with these ungodly lines. And sometimes you have to realize, wait, ungodly lines for a 90-second clip, not really that worth it. And sometimes, and it may be for you. It may be that's still what you're into. And I don't mean to knock it. I'm just saying that I'm at a point where and like you just said, there's very little that kind of speaks to me on that level. But then those things that do really do, which is why I made a point that I wanted to go to, like I said, the Batman 66 animated movie premiere. There was no way I was going to miss that. For what I do at 13th Dimension, but on a personal level, I really wanted to be there for that. But those things are far and few between.
There's some experiential stuff to it. I mean, there's that component, like you mentioned the Nathan Fillion thing earlier, like hearing the room erupt. Like, I've been in those rooms where it erupts, and it's very cool.
It is fun.
I mean,
it's
especially
fun.
if you're
it's
well
communal.
situated.
And everybody
exactly.
everybody lets the flag fly. That's the other thing. Is everybody, there is a sense that you are among your people. And that part of it is really, really good too.
But I mean, 9 times out of 10, I mean, if you've been in those rooms, they're big. They're like stadiums. They're like arenas. They seat 5,000 people, you know?
Right.
And you're like 9 miles away, and you're watching these people, these celebrities who you love or you're fans of on a screen most of the time.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're up front, it's different. I mean, it's that whole I was there kind of thing. It's completely unlike anything in the world. I mean, we've shared a lot of good, we shared a lot of bad, but really, like, there is nothing like it. I mean, and it's something that really needs to be experienced for yourself, both the big and the small conventions. I mean, it's wholly unique, much like the comic book medium itself. And go to C2E2 this year because I'm working on that show and I want to make it big.
I wanted to go to C2E2.
Yeah.
That's cool. It's a celebration. And that's the thing that, and I mentioned it earlier, we said people let their flags fly. It's an opportunity for people who are into this sort of thing to gather in one place and be the majority. You know, even though in a sense the geeks have inherited the earth. When you talk about television, you talk about movies and all that kind of stuff. But even so, it's not the same thing as going to this one gathering place where everybody is really, really, really into it and celebrating this stuff. However it is, whether they're dressing up or buying stuff or going to panels, there is something really exciting and exalting about the whole thing.
And now, here are the hard-traveling heroes. To my right, he is the creator of the Pick series of graphic novels from Image Comics and the host of the Stuff Said and Cruisin' Together podcasts. Gregg Schigiel, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I hope people aren't sick of me yet.
Yeah, you become a frequent guest.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, there's a reason for that, though.
You're going to say nice things about me.
And the same can also be said for our other guest to my left. He is the owner of Undiscovered Realm in White Plains, New York, and the organizer of the Undiscovered Realm Comic-Con. Chris Wilcock, thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone. And I want to echo the I hope you're not sick of me too thing. But I really do love being on, so thanks.
No, it's great to have both of you. So this is our hard-traveling heroes episode. Much like Green Lantern and Green Arrow in the 1970s series of comics, we've all done our fair share of traveling across the country. We've traveled to comic shops, conventions, signings, film festivals, weddings, concerts, you name it. And sometimes what happens on the road can be even more memorable than the events themselves. So that's mostly what I kind of want to get into today. But before we get into specific instances, just a quick question for each of you. Do you guys enjoy traveling, or is it more of a necessary evil to being a comic creator or a Funko Pop vendor?
Depends where you're going, is really what it comes down to. So I would say I don't dislike traveling. It used to be easier before there was things like the TSA and all these hassles to get onto an airplane, because if you're traveling with a computer and everything, it just slows everything down. But really, it depends where you're going. It depends why you're going. So for me, it's mostly going to conventions. And if you're going to somewhere cool, it's great, an excuse to try new things and go to new restaurants and go to grocery stores, as everybody knows I like to do. Or now they all know.
That's right. Yeah. So in the live special, the live My Comic Shop History special recorded at Undiscovered Realm Comic-Con, you were one of my guests.
Right.
And it became this recurring theme that you like checking out the grocery stores in whatever town you visit.
Yes. So I like eating at places that are specific to that area or what have you. So in those cases, travel can be a lot of fun. And then I've often said the best thing about conventions is everything that happens when you're not at the convention. So post-show, you're hanging out with other creators or what have you and just having a good time sketching at a hotel lobby or in hotel rooms. So in that regard, traveling is great. It's not great because the other metaphor I use, and this is a sports metaphor, is it's almost like you're playing a football game. Like your job is a football game, and then you call a timeout to go to a convention. But during that timeout, you're running wind sprints. So you're doing all the same work, but you're gaining no yardage. You're not actually furthering your day job. You're going out to this thing and you're working your butt off for 3, sometimes 4 days if it's something like San Diego, New York Comic-Con. And then you get back and you have to start playing that football game again. You're like it can wipe you out pretty good.
I like how he kicks off this show that will primarily be listened to by comic book fans with the sports analogy.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's a good analogy, though.
Right? It's pretty good because you're running a store, right? And then you leave that store.
Hard. Yeah.
And you're working probably twice as hard because you're hustling and you're in close proximity to other stores.
Yeah.
And you got to go back to your store and keep working.
It's the same thing.
It's certainly
like,
not a vacation.
No. But it has its perks, right? Like everyone asks that question a lot, and you know, a lot of what you said is the same. But because you're kind of we have to sell stuff, so we're not stopping selling. You know, it's like an extension of work, but a lot of the same things ring true. Like the traveling's fun. We also don't get to fly anywhere because we got to lug a giant trailer.
Right.
So it's a little more tedious if we have to do like a New Orleans 25-hour drive or Chicago, you know, things like that. So now these like 3, 4, 5-hour drives seem like a breeze. So it's cool because you look forward to doing the shows and seeing everybody, and you really do start to see the same people every week. 80% of it's the same vendors, and it becomes like a little tight-knit family, you know. But you do miss being home, relaxing, you know, seeing your wife, your dog, you know, things like that. And it does take away from the store. It's hard because like when we're on the drives, if I'm not driving, I'm literally making orders, answering emails, doing questions. So it makes an already hard job twice as hard. And if you're in the middle of a show, you can't really stop to answer emails and things like that. So it's a lot of fun, but it's a ton of work. So it's hard to complain because most people won't understand. They'll be like, "Oh, I love going to cons. I only get to go to one a year."
Right.
How could you be upset about it? And you know, it's a different world, really.
Yeah, your drives. So, I mean, I follow all of your posts on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. You know, you do a lot. So, I guess overall, your record is a good one. But some of the bad luck that you run into, because I'm seeing this stuff. I mean, you know, flat tires and stuck in snow and all kinds of stuff. Boxes, you know, toppled over.
Well, I guess the more you do, the higher the chance you're going to have a problem, right? So it might seem a little more than it is, but. Yeah, you're going to run into these things. We've luckily nothing too crazy, but you really do run into everything, and it just seems to always rain. If you have a 15-hour drive or you have to unload an entire trailer, it just seems to only pour on those days, and it's been ridiculous. Like the last 3 months, every show it's just a downpour. That's getting a little old.
Yeah. You know, Greg, going back to what you were saying about, you know, TSA restrictions and all of that. So, you know, I've been traveling for work and a wedding and a few things. But, you know, one of the main things that I'm doing now is traveling to different stores in different parts of the country, different comic shops to record the other show with them. And so one of my goals has been making my podcast setup as portable as possible. So the first trip that I took, I used my existing mixer, which is a larger Mackie mixer, in its own bag. So I had 2 bags, one with the mixer, one with everything else. It got, not confiscated, but, you know, they flagged it and they had to take it out and look at it because it's not a laptop, but I guess it looks like that, or it looks like it could be something.
There's a lot of circuitry in it.
Yes.
I'm sure they're seeing circuits.
So then I was like, you know, I don't want to go through this hassle every time. Plus, it would be nice to only have one bag of equipment. So I upgraded to the smaller Shure mixer that we're using right now.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, problem solved. And then I just flew to Palm Desert and it got flagged.
You know what else will get flagged?
What?
A box of books. If you just have a stack of books or a stack of magazines in your bag, it just they can't see what it is. Just a big block of nothing. And they'll go through every. This isn't even a show. I was down at home in Florida, and I'd found a stack of Comic Scene magazines, which is a magazine that's probably before your time, but it was a comic book magazine predating Wizard.
Wow.
And I found like 50 of these things. It was a magazine I really liked, so I packed them in my bag, and the bag got flagged, and they had to go through they literally went through every one of these magazines to make sure that, I don't even know what they were looking for.
Anthrax or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, a stack of books will stop you. A mixer clearly will stop you. And I also learned coming back from Seattle one year with some salamis, they will stop those too. Because these are just these long tubes that they're like, what is that? And then they double check my salamis.
Yeah.
That must have been quite the experience. Hope they bought you dinner first, at least.
Could you get pre-screened for having electronics or something like that if you're traveling that much?
I don't know. I mean, there's that TSA pre-check, but I don't know what that covers or doesn't cover.
Yeah, you are. I mean, you're paying for that, but I know it might be worth it.
Well, if you're doing it like week in and week out, definitely. I mean, if it's every now and again, I guess you just deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, and coming back from Palm Desert, it didn't get flagged. So it depends on who's working there too.
That's also true. Yeah.
Although that airport, this was the Palm Springs International Airport, very small airport, very nice, but very small. We got there way too early for our return flight. That's on me. But because it was like my usual training of you got to get there a couple hours before. And we were even a little more than that, I think. And it was not necessary. But no joke, there was one main active terminal gate.
Yeah.
There was nobody there for a significant period of time. It was completely unattended.
It's weird, right? But we're used to like JFK and LaGuardia, and we're New York City, and you go to these places, and it's a joke sometimes.
Oh, I love those small airports. They're the
Yeah.
best.
Have you ever flown out of Westchester?
I've never flown out of Westchester. I've flown into Islip once. I've flown into like Burbank Airport is much smaller than LAX. Long Beach Airport is much smaller. Greensboro Airport is tiny.
Yeah, so now, Chris, you don't, I mean, obviously with the conventions, you're not flying. Do you fly a lot generally? Or
here and there.
More of a road trip guy?
We would, now we would fly for Magic tournaments a lot. But now that I've been on the road so much, I like Las Vegas, there's a huge Magic tournament next week. The biggest one like ever, basically. And I just have no desire to go. I do not want to travel anywhere. I don't need to go. I don't want to fly. I don't want to do anything. So it's kind of diminished a little bit. But, concerts, weddings, things like you were talking about earlier. I still fly for, but it's far enough between where I still don't mind it. But I could totally understand why, if I had to do that every week. I think about some of these guys that do shows, like the celebrities and things, every week, in and out, in and out. I just don't know how they do it. It's got to be hell.
There are, I don't think I'm speaking out of school. As far as I understand, Mike McCone, comic book artist.
Sure.
He lived, last time I spoke to him, he lives on the road. He just,
Really?
goes hotel to hotel and does
That's-
commissions and does covers, and that's,
It cuts down on your overhead a lot. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's true.
If you don't have anything to come home for, we talk about this all the time. Like if I wasn't married or I didn't have businesses to come, why even come home? You just spend a couple extra days in the city, and you get to see the country. You get to, that's the stuff. We're in all these cities, and you never get to see them. Everyone's like, oh, it must be great. You're going here. It's like, no, I'm seeing the convention center. It looks exactly like every other convention center, and I'm going back to my hotel room, and I'm passing out, and I'm waking up, and I'm repeating it, and then I'm going home. There's no, you get my favorite thing, and everyone's like, oh, you want to get a quick bite at like McDonald's? I'm like, no, I want to go to a restaurant. I want to sit down and decompress. And that's the only thing that really changes. And even then, it's just whatever chain usually, unless there's like a notable place in that city.
you got to do the research, man.
And
It's just,
sometimes you get burned, which I know happened to you recently.
Oh my God.
In
That's
Chicago.
the worst experience of my life. I got really bad food poisoning about 5 hours before a 17 or 18 hour drive in the trailer. And
Where was this
hell.
in Chicago? Because I'm going to be in Chicago in 2 weeks, so I want to avoid it.
Yeah, I'll be there in October. So
I have to recommend the restaurant was the coolest thing in the world, but the food poisoning wasn't. And I'm only one out of the 4 that got food poisoning.
All right.
What
was the place? What'd you order?
I ordered this giant grilled chicken sandwich. But it was this spy themed restaurant.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever heard of it. It was in Wisconsin for like 30 years. Is this famous thing? They just opened the Chicago one like a month before we got there. But you literally go to this nondescript door. You walk in. There's like this at midnight. Oh, like this very odd albino man sitting in this room, just covered with maps, and it looks like he's plotting to blow up the world or something. And he makes you come in, they lock the door behind you, and you have no idea where you are. And he starts asking you for like passwords and all this weird stuff. And then they make you do all these weird things. And then finally they hit a button and this wall just moves, and you go down this weird stone spiral staircase into a basement. And when you get there, I thought we were going to die the entire time. I'm not even joking. Like I was legitimately concerned. But you get down there and it's this awesome spy themed restaurant, and like everything on the walls, like golden eyes gun and this and that and the other thing, and it's fully themed. Like the waitress comes up and she gives you like a dossier with a menu in it. It's really cool. The food poisoning wasn't really cool, and I suspect it was the weird albino man. No, I don't think he did it on purpose, but he got really mad at me because I asked the waitress, because everyone's an actor, and I was like, is that guy really albino? And then he comes down like 20 minutes later, walks by, stops in his tracks, just gives me the death stare right in my eyes, and he's like, I am albino, and then walks into the kitchen, and I'm like, well, I'm dying on the road trip. I'm like, maybe.
Cursed you, yeah.
Yeah.
We were at a wedding just a few weeks ago in Jersey, one of my wife's childhood friends, and a bunch of people did get food poisoning after from the Raw Bar. So I don't do like the clams and oysters, but she and her dad and a few others did partake, and
that's always a
the results were
calculated
not
risk.
great.
It's like it's gonna happen. It's like riding a motorcycle. Like you're gonna crash eventually. Like it might be 10 years, it might be a month, but you're eventually gonna get hit.
Yeah, I was taken down by one of my favorite foods, by burgers at that Westchester magazine. Yeah, like that food festival. They do it every year at Kensico Dam, and they do their burger and beer bash.
Right.
So sliders from restaurants all across Westchester. I mean, I was in my glory. I was so
Sure.
I tried them all.
Yeah.
It really, the worst part is like for a while after, you just don't want to even look at that food again. Like it just, I don't know.
It's funny though. I feel like I went back to eating burgers.
Oh, that's good.
Sooner than
Then
you
you
might
probably
think.
should.
Speaking of burgers, if you ever find yourself in San Diego, go to Hodad's.
Okay.
fantastic.
San Diego's got good food.
Yeah, I went to San Diego 11 years in a row. Never went to the zoo. Never just went to San Diego. I haven't been since 2012. I think it was my last year. And the only thing I miss are the places we would eat after the show. Hodad's, Phil's Barbecue, the Mexican places with real good tortillas.
Ooh. That's the best thing about I'm not a big West Coast guy at all, but San Diego is like one of the only cities I really, really liked when I was out there.
Have you been to San Diego Comic-Con?
I'd have, but not in like 8 years or so. Yeah, and I've never done it as a vendor.
Right. Yeah. What's the farthest you've gone as a vendor?
New Orleans and Chicago. It's about where we draw the line, like the middle of the country. New Orleans was literally a 25-hour straight drive.
So you don't cross the Mississippi.
We haven't. I really wanted to do Emerald City this year,
Right.
but I just couldn't make it work with everything else that was going on. It was too close to Undiscovered Realm Comic Con.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to try that next year.
Have you ever gone up to Canada?
I haven't, just because driving over the border with the
Right.
product, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I've heard horror stories.
Now, on your recent trip back from, where were you just coming back from?
This week or
Yeah,
we just came back from Foxwoods.
Oh, okay. Is that where all the boxes were toppled
Yeah,
over? What went on
yeah.
there?
Well, we switched over to like a different system, but I had a couple friends helping me out. Brian O'Day being one of them. You know, everyone knows
Yes,
him from
for
the office.
alternate realities regular.
It wasn't Brian that did it, by the way, but they weren't used to the intricate system, so they didn't stack the boxes properly. So we go to unload, we pack everything up. It's like hours have gone by. You're just ready to throw everything in the trailer and be done. And like I open the door and it's just like 70 long boxes of pops just everywhere across a 16-foot trailer. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was just like another thing,
Now, circling back to our hard traveling heroes theme here, Chris, I guess I'll toss it to you first because there's something that I really want to hear more about. I saw your post about it, but I want to get the firsthand in person account of this. That incident you had with a cashier on the way back from one of the conventions, that was crazy.
Tammy, yeah.
So set it up.
So
for
yeah,
us.
so we just did a show in Virginia Beach, which was an awful. I'm sure it's a nice place, but I did not have a good experience the entire time there. But so we drove, I want to say like 8-9 hours. We stopped. We're like 5 minutes from the hotel finally after straight through drive. It's something like 4:35 in the morning. So we get out. There's a Walgreens. These new pops had just come out and we needed a drink before we go to the hotel, whatever. So we're like, all right, we'll get some drinks. We'll check for the pops. So we go in. I'm in there. It was set up very odd because it's like a beach town. So they sell a lot of stuff that normal Walgreens wouldn't, like, big towels and things like that. And so I couldn't find the aisle where it normally is. So I'm like wandering around a little bit. I finally find it. I check the pops. I get down and I knocked a whole bunch of stuff off the shelf by accident because it was all packed tight together. So, I'm not going to leave it like that. I got down and I put everything back on the shelf neatly. And I go up to the register with 2 pops and I go to check out. So I swipe my card and she's like, okay, are you going to pay for the stuff in your pockets? And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, the stuff you put in your pockets. So I immediately get like really aggravated. And I'm like, I empty my pockets. I'm like, what? And she's like, your back pocket. And I'm like, I don't even have a back pocket, lady. And I was like, I really don't need to steal like. She's like, well, we've been having a lot of people steal Pokemon cards. I'm like, I really don't need to steal your Pokemon. Meanwhile, I got a 16-foot trailer packed with cards outside. And the weird part was, and I'm glad it didn't come up, was we had just left the store and I had a loose thing of cards in my pocket. They were Magic cards, luckily, and they didn't sell them there. But it would have been so hard to explain that one, right? So anyway, so we go outside and I'm like so aggravated. And all of a sudden, like 3 cop cars pull up behind the trailer. And I'm like, I didn't even in my head think it was related. And so they come over and they're like, hey. And I'm like, yeah, can I help you? And they're like, where's the other, one of the other guys working for me just got in the van. He's like, get that guy over here. So he comes over. They're like, what did you steal? And I'm like, no, I explained it to them. I'm like, listen, like, it was a misunderstanding, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, we need to go inside. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So we go in and immediately, like, the lady's just standing there. I'm like, are you serious? And the cop comes over. He's like, so they didn't steal anything? And she wasn't even apologetic, which is what really pissed me off. She's just like, unfortunately, no. It was a misunderstanding. And like you could tell the cop's annoyed, like, and it was just this whole thing. And like, why do I need to steal Pokemon? I'm like a 33-year-old man. I'm not gonna steal Pokemon cards from your Walgreens, And so it turns this whole thing. So we went on like Yelp, and like every review is like, never go to this Walgreens. Like blah 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 blah. Like I've had the cops call on me 3 times. And what pissed me off the most is the cops were there. We were in there for 4 minutes. So before we even walked through the store, she must have called the cops. Like,
right.
It was just insane. And so that was fun. So I remember Tammy.
It's like it's a chain. They're supposed to be all the same, and this one is like singled out. Like you don't want to go to this one.
Yeah. But yeah, screw Tammy in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
All right, there we go. Now we know.
Yeah. Have you ever had any weird stuff come up, like run-ins?
No, not well. I don't know if this would be considered a run-in. Okay, this is a good story though. This is the one when I thought of when Anthony mentioned the theme of this is the story I thought of. So I'd been going to San Diego Comic-Con, me and my cohorts, for a number of years, and this was before it was completely insane. But in I think it was 2008, we found this hotel, right on the gas lamp district is right out by the convention center in San Diego. We found this hotel that was awesome. Boutique hotel, relatively cheap, 8 blocks from the convention center. I'm like, this hotel is amazing. And as we left Comic-Con that year, I said to them, I'm like, I want to book, I think it was 3 rooms for next year. Can we do that now? No
hotels
problem.
are extremely hard to come by. So if you find a place you like and you can do it in advance, you might as well.
So we booked these rooms, and then we had 3 rooms. So I'm like, we got these 3 rooms. Who's coming? And in the following year, all of us went, and then people were bringing their girlfriends. People were coming in for this show. It was a big crew were showing up. So I would always go into LA first and then drive down with a friend of mine to San Diego. So I fly out, I get down to San Diego, we go to this hotel, and it is out of business. The hotel is closed. It does not exist anymore. And Comic-Con starts that night. We show up on Wednesday for preview night.
Sure.
And we have nowhere to stay. And there's about 6 other people on their planes getting to San Diego. And we have nothing. So that became its own. And this was, I guess it might have been 2009. So there was the internet, but the phones weren't that smart yet.
No, not at all.
There was a lot of basically calling up. I don't even know who we called up, but we were just calling people and saying are there any rooms? Are there any rooms? So we found this hotel, the Padre Trails Inn. We were able to get. It was way out there. It was real grimy, real grungy. The women in our crew wanted to go to a Target to buy sheets to change the sheets in the beds. It was that kind of a situation. We stayed there one night. Went to the convention center the next day, and then while we were at the con, the ladies went and found us rooms at a Holiday Inn, and we were able to, we survived it. But it was showing up and seeing your hotel doesn't exist.
Yeah,
the show starts in 5 hours. Is full panic mode.
Yeah,
and you have enough to deal with a show like that. Even as an attendee, never mind if you're there for business purposes.
Luckily it was before things were so insane.
Well, I went that year. It was still pretty insane. That's the last time I went, actually. Yeah, it was still nuts.
Yeah, it was 09, 08, something like that. It was maybe it was 04. I don't know. But then I also went to, I think that was the year we went to a Denny's, and that was the last time I ever went to a Denny's on the food poisoning tip. I had to leave my table a number of times.
Oh, that's a fun trip.
Yeah, that was a rough year at San Diego Comic-Con. And then there was a couple years before that, we'd picked up a rental car at Long Beach Airport, and we're driving down. And on our drive, a tire blew out on the highway, and we had to pull off and change the tire and get there and switch the cars. And so, those things do happen for sure. But that San Diego hotel situation was. I
don't know how you even were able to find one, because even that year before, like you said, it's before it got nuts. I remember we had we couldn't even get a flight to San Diego. We had to fly to LAX, rent a car, drive all the way to San Diego. We stayed at some hotel that was attached to a Hooters or something like that, and a strip club. It was the weirdest. I guess they just revolved staff.
Funny about the strip club. I wanted to mention this. So I mentioned my Ohio trip. I was there. The official reason I was there was for a wedding. One of my best friends from high school got married. And again, while I was there, I took advantage of it, and I went to the Pack Rat Comics there. But I was there for the wedding, and it was in Columbus. And what was funny about it was the hotel was a little way off the main road, but sort of the landmark that we used to kind of guide us right where we made the turn was a strip club, and it wasn't tucked away. I mean, it was right on the main road. It was very prominent, and it just made me laugh because my friend and his family, they're somewhat conservative and religious, but the bride and her family were very Catholic. I mean, the wedding was a full mass, full mass. The father of the bride, he gave a toast at the reception. It was all about God being first in your lives. And I just can't help but think of all these family members.
Just driving past.
Everybody has to drive past that strip club.
What was the punny name for the strip club? Did it have
I don't remember.
A name that, a cheeky sort of strip club name?
I don't think it did, because I feel like I would have remembered that. The only thing I did remember was that Saturday night, the night of the wedding, they were having a girl-on-girl kissing contest, $1,000 cash prize.
They could have paid for the wedding.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know. Weddings, I think, are more expensive than $1,000.
Yeah, even in Ohio.
I know. Yeah, believe me, I just got married 2 years ago. I'm aware.
Yeah, your dollar does go a lot farther. And kind of on that note, going back to the comic shop real quick, the amount of space that they have to work with crazy. And I don't know the rent that they pay, but I know they're paying less than than what we paid here and what you pay. It's amazing. But so the strip club thing was kind of funny.
I understand that's a big. I know that's a thing that people do when they go to conventions. I know go
to a strip club.
Yeah, like creators and stuff. I remember the first year I went to Heroes Con, which was in 1998. And I was very excited to go. It was first year at Marvel Comics, and I was going as an employee of Marvel Comics. And I just wanted to go see Tarzan, the Disney Tarzan movie.
No, it just came out.
It just come out. And like there was a group of people like, wait, we're going to see Tarzan? Like, why aren't we going to the strip club? But it was actually the best because this was amazing. I talked about this on my podcast because it was I went with the crew that I went with, like Mike Waringo, Todd DeZago, Craig Russo were all there. Like I went with them. But then in the same theater, like Olive Gaijin Studios was there. Ron Garnier was there. Like it's just like this. We were all there to see this movie, and it was the freaking coolest thing in the world because I was 23, hanging out with all these people whose work I'd admired, and like I was being considered almost like one of them. Like they brought me, like they welcomed me in, and I was in their cars driving to these shows. Like this is the best. It's still one of my best convention experiences ever. And again, it goes back to that. The best stuff is when you're not even at the show. Is when you're just out.
It is.
About.
It's very true. Yeah.
And the movie was awesome.
Yeah, you're so wholesome. You know your claim to fame. You drew that anti-drug issue.
Yeah.
Don't do pot. You don't go to strip clubs.
I know.
Very wholesome.
I mean, I've been to strip clubs. I can't suspend my disbelief. There's a lot of things about strip clubs that I don't quite understand. It also seems like that kind of thing should be private time. Like, there's nothing shameful about it. Sure, be naked, whatever. But like, I don't want to do that with my bros around.
You know what's weird?
Like, I don't
Everyone
get
talks
any
about
of that.
strip clubs. Yeah, I've been to a few, and like I don't care. Like it's not like, oh yeah, let's go to a strip club. But it almost ends up like it's like when you go to dinner somewhere and you're just like having a conversation. It's just like it's the same thing. Like you're actually like almost having a meeting, but there's just naked women dancing around. I had this really awkward experience in Richmond last year where we did there was nowhere else to go. And we're like, it's a Wednesday night. We're like, let's see how bad this could possibly be. Nobody else in the place except the three of us. Right. Awkward as hell. 25 girls working. And they did this thing where they would make them go on the stage every half hour on the half hour and do a dance around the stage. And after like the second time this happened, we're like, there's nobody else here, guys. You don't need to do this. And like the lady's like, you have to do it. It was just the weirdest experience of my life.
They're running a business. Like it's a business.
Yeah, I guess. But it was just very odd. So yeah, I don't get it either. I guess I know what you mean. I'd prefer to see Tarzan too.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah,
changed the way I drew. Like it did like a rewiring in my brain. Like all the next day I was just sketching.
Now, as far as like mingling after hours, I know Chris, you said you see a lot of the same people at conventions.
For sure.
Do you guys socialize after, or is there even time for that?
No. So yes and no. So we're like a weird case because like you were saying like we go right out to the restaurants and blah blah. We have to restock just because we're so like product dense that like going back to those boxes and stuff like that. We finish the show, we restock for like 30 minutes to an hour. Then we go to the trailer and like I'll basically snap pictures of all the racks and we'll go through the back stock and pull whatever we don't have to restock the shelves. So it takes like 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes depending on a crazy show. And so by that time it's already 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And restaurants are closing, everybody's already gone out, so that kind of cuts down on it for us. But you still do, while you're setting up, it's like, oh, hey, what's up? I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. What shows were you at? Oh, what show was you at? How was this? Blah, blah, blah. You start to see the same celebrities like Flash Gordon. Like he comes to the booth every show now. He's like, hey, what's up? Blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, it's weird. Like even if it's like a Z-list star or it's an A-list star, you see Jason David Frank like every week, and it's just, as a small shop. I had this story last week. Wizard World hired Kato Kalin as an MC now for their main stage during the events, and he does a good job. Like everyone gives him, it's Kato Kalin, like blah blah. But he actually does a pretty good job. But whatever. So I'm seeing him the whole time, and all I can think of is I was in an elevator with him, and I'm like, when I was a kid, they interrupted Power Rangers. It was a 5-part series where they introduced the Green Ranger, right? And the 5th part, I come home from school, I'm like, all right, like I can't wait to watch this, and it's like Kato Kalin on TV testifying in the OJ trial, and I just lost my mind. I never done this in my life. I got so mad. I was probably like, I don't even know, 9, 10 years old. I called Fox and I'm like, to complain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'll never forget it. The lady on the phone, before I even said a word, she goes, let me guess, you're mad that Power Rangers isn't on. And I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, And so my whole life, I just associated Kato Kalin with this incident. And then there he is in an elevator with me, and I'm seeing the Green Ranger every weekend. And it's just, it's really weird. And even though it's been like 40 times this has happened, like you still are a little weird, it's just, you don't get used to it fully.
I mean, there's something weird when it's somebody that you've seen on TV. Yeah. They almost, there's like another sort of weird mythic quality to them. Mm-hmm. Whereas opposed to like comic book artists, where there's a line in where our fame is.
Sure.
And I'm far from that line. But even the most famous, like nobody knows who Robert Kirkman is. If you're not a comic book person,
Sure,
he
true.
can go to dinner somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone will,
Right.
the biggest Walking Dead fan in
Right.
the world. will
Well, they
walk past him
might
50
because he's
times.
been on like Conan O'Brien and stuff.
True, but even still.
Yeah.
It's funny with the Power Rangers thing. I had the same thing, but with Family Matters, where the OJ trial interrupted Family Matters. I wish I could remember the exact episode, but I remember just being incensed similarly.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it was
It's
like,
all you look forward to all week.
that
and
it got preempted. I mean, I wasn't moved enough to call.
Yeah,
give you
I
credit
don't
for
know.
that.
I was really
Well, you
angry.
probably-
This is a 5-part build-up.
Right.
You know, like who's
And
the Green Ranger? You
By
know.
then, you probably knew that Urkel did that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that mystery was solved.
But still, yeah, it's funny. But yeah, you know, and you can apply that story to like 50 other people, and it's a weird situation, you know. It's like, and then when you see the celebrities interacting with each other, and like Stan Lee, for whatever reason, loves the Green Ranger, and every time they're at a show together, he just pops up in his booth, and it's a weird interaction. Like, why does this 93-year-old man love the Green Ranger so much?
Right.
But yeah.
Now, my hard traveling heroes, what are some of your favorite or least favorite places that you've been? I mean, separate from the events themselves, but just as far as
Cities?
places to go. Yeah.
I do like San Diego, although I haven't seen much of it. I like going to Los Angeles, but I have a lot of friends there, and I kind of pal around with people.
I hate Los Angeles.
I like Seattle a lot.
I've heard great things.
Yeah.
I've never been there.
I've never been either.
I'm a big fan of Seattle. If it wasn't so pricey to get out there and stay out there, I'd go more often. But I like Seattle quite a bit. Where else have I gone that I've
Have you been
enjoyed?
to Oregon? Or
I've
Portland?
not. I've
Yeah,
not been to
everybody
Portland.
raves about that.
I've never been.
Yeah, that's somewhere I want to go. But yeah, you've probably been a lot more places than I have. but-
I've been to a bunch of places that I haven't gone to the West Coast as much as I would like to,
Yeah,
just
same.
because for me a convention, and I talked about this when on the podcast, I try and you want to make your money to make it worth going, and a West Coast flight alone sort
Yes.
of puts you in the hole, and
Yep.
then the hotel puts you in the hole, and by that point you're pretty deep, and even selling books makes you less money than selling sketches.
Of course.
And I'm not a huge enough name to charge a huge enough for the sketches to like clean up. So it sort of becomes a real. I would love to be invited. If anybody wants to invite me to shows, I'm dreaming of I would love for there to be a SpongeBob Con in Hawaii, and I want to be an invited guest. That's one of my dreams.
That's probably not that hard. Honestly, do you ever reach out?
Well, there is no SpongeBob Con. It
Well,
doesn't
no,
exist.
not to a SpongeBob con, but just cons in general. Because
Some of them I do, and sometimes they'll offer a table or whatever. Like it's normally if they're going to pay for the,
they're not
the
gonna
trip
pay for
in
the
the
hotel
hotel,
and
they
everything
reach
a
out.
lot of times,
They would
yeah.
reach out to me.
But you'd be surprised because especially like these days where there's so many new shows coming up
Yeah.
and guests are spread so thin, like people, honestly, you should reach out a little more, especially for newer shows. They'd probably be happy to have you out because like even being able to put like your photo with a picture of SpongeBob
Right.
makes a huge difference in promoting the show. And,
Sure.
it's I would try it anyway.
From a festival,
No,
from a
yeah,
convention
That's
organizer.
true. Yeah, I guess. I forgot.
I understand. I'm listening.
But for me, I don't know. I really like Chicago a lot. I have this weird,
Me
aside
too.
from the food poisoning, but you know what I noticed? I keep bringing this back to New York. I guess I love New York. But when you are from here and you go anywhere else, nothing compares. Like everything closes at midnight or 2 in the morning if you're lucky, even in like LA. And, you know, it's 11 o'clock at night. You're trying to find a restaurant. You can't even find that. And it's just a weird difference. Like you just take it for granted what you have here. So nothing ever really stacks up. The closest place I've ever had stack up to New York was like London. And even then, like it's not New York. I don't know. So I really like Chicago for whatever reason.
Chicago's a lot like New York.
It is, but everything
the
closes.
streets
super
are wider.
early.
Less
Yeah.
congested.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like you can walk around the heart of the city at midnight and you might not see another soul on the street. And then like, you know, you go to Times Square or anywhere in New York City, even at 3 in the morning and there's 1,000 people.
I like DC. I've been to DC a couple times. I like DC. I've never been to New Orleans. I'd like to go. Like there are places I'd like to go.
It was cool. So like, I don't drink.
Nor do I.
Okay. So you might not like New Orleans. So I was
I
very,
like to eat though.
Yeah. So even that, like I was very let down by New Orleans. I
Really?
got to be honest. I'm sure some people hate me for this, but like it's a very rundown city, which is fine. I'm not like knocking it for that. And they've obviously had a lot of struggles and things like that.
they've had it
and
rough.
they're still rebuilding a lot of that stuff. But like, it's just like, there's certain blocks, like people warn me, they're like, you know, if you go to Bourbon Street, don't go 1 block left or right from this area, like even in the daytime. And like, I'm like, oh, I'm from New York. Like I'm used to, and you're still like, all right, I understand what they're saying. And like, if you walk every 2 feet, you walk, somebody's trying to like panhandle or beg you or try and con you out of money or take it. And again, being from New York, you're used to this, right? But if you're from anywhere else in the country, I could see like you just getting taken advantage of every 2 feet. I don't know. I just wasn't thrilled with it. you
Yeah,
know?
I've never been, but Steph was there for a work conference a couple years ago, and she had the very similar takeaway
Yeah,
as that.
so I'm glad I'm not alone.
This is a fun road story. I can't believe I forgot this one. So one year, to go to Heroes Con, I thought it might be fun to drive down there, rent a car, drive from New York to Charlotte, and drive back.
That's like 9 hours?
It's 11 hours,
Okay.
10 hours. So this was, I think this was 2004. So pre-GPS
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So I had a bunch of Yahoo Maps, or MapQuest. I'm sorry, it was MapQuest maps
yeah, good
printed
old
out.
MapQuest.
I
and
was
then-
still using MapQuest up until like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had a bunch of MapQuest maps, and I had places en route to possibly stop. So there was one, there was this barbecue place in Manassas, Virginia that I wanted to go to. And we got completely lost, like added an extra hour and a half to our trip. And then it was me, Jacob Shabbat, and Paul Azaceta. We're driving down. So we got lost looking for this barbecue place, found it. It was fine. It wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
And then we got to Charlotte, and to your point of places closing super early, we'd leave the show, get in the car, and I would drive to these places that I'd mapped out and done all this research. And every time we'd get to one, it would be closed.
So
every time.
funny you say that.
killing me.
I've only been to Charlotte once, and we did a Magic tournament there. And during the weekend, nobody goes to that city unless they're there for work during the week. It was the weirdest experience of my life. It was like being in The Walking Dead or something. Like you would not see a person. There'd be like one bird flying around in the heart of the city on a Saturday afternoon.
Most downtowns outside of New York and New York
Yeah,
are kind of
Yeah.
aren't where people live and breathe.
Cleveland's like
Yep.
that too. Just a ghost town. It's so weird.
Buffalo.
Rochester's like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Oh, all due respect to Rochester, that is one of the worst places I've ever been.
I had a bad experience in Rochester. I drove there to pick up a car once when I was a kid, and from a family member that was giving it to me. So it was a great thing, but I had to get up so early. I didn't go to sleep the night before, and I went all the way up there, and I had to drive the car back, and I was like 30 hours no sleep, and it was just awful. And it was like 10 feet of snow like everywhere. It was just hell. So I didn't give it a fair shake.
Yeah, upstate. So I'm not the biggest fan. So I have some family up there. We're not really in touch, but as a kid, we would go up and visit sometimes, and it was fine. So my day job now, though, I work in law school admissions, and a decent part of my job is recruitment. So there are fairs at schools across the country. It's really, it kills me now because I really used to hate it, but now that I actually want to travel to go to these comic shops,
Yeah.
it's like, I wish
It's
I had
2
been
for
doing
1.
this even sooner. And I'm at not that I'm so senior in the office now, but I'm at the point where I don't have to go on as many trips as I used to. It's like,
Right.
And now you want to.
but I'm still managing to make it work as best as I can. But anyway, there's this upstate swing of recruiting events every year, end of September, beginning of October. And my first couple of years there, I had to do it, and I hated it. I think the first year I did it, I was filming the documentary about Jay Mizell and the closing up of the flea market where he had his booth, and his last day at the market was the day before I had to be in Buffalo. So whereas normally I would have gone up on a Sunday, I would have either flown or driven and taken my time. I had to be at that flea market to capture those last hours. So I remember I was there with Jay all day, and I went home and I got really just like a couple hours of sleep, and then I was on the road at like 4 a.m. driving up to Buffalo. I made great time.
Yeah, that's true.
So there was that at least. And then there was another time I went to Buffalo for a film festival, and I think I've mentioned this on one of the other podcasts earlier on, but talk about a deserted town. I mean, there was no one there, and it was heartbreaking because I was there for a film festival. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. People are going to be here. They're going to see the movie, and there was just nobody around. So we were there like Saturday and Sunday, which is when the festival was, and it was dead, and the festival was dead. It was really disappointing. And then Monday when we left, that's everyone came back to go to work, and so all of a sudden there's all this activity, but it drove me nuts. So I consider Buffalo my personal phantom zone.
Upstate New York, like it just, I don't know. I think the listening people from up there is going to drop off dramatically after this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel bad.
Sorry, guys.
I said all due respect to Rochester. I said it. I saved my bacon. You guys keep digging the hole.
I know. Listen, I appreciate all of my listeners, wherever they are,
Even the ones in Buffalo?
especially the ones
There
in
we
Buffalo.
go.
Well,
Good
they have
job.
nothing to do. They might be listening a lot more. So
I just wish they'd come out to that film festival.
So here's a question that has nothing to do with anything, but it has to do with traveling. I don't know
Yes.
if this is on your notes, but have you ever gotten sick on a trip, mid-trip, not food
Yeah.
poisoning, but like straight up, like you just caught a bug. Like there's all this talk of con crud after a show,
Yeah,
but has it
con
ever
crud.
hit you in like during a show? Because I got sick at San Diego,
Oh.
like Saturday night, it hit me. So Sunday I was laid out. I actually left the convention to go home, to go to the hotel and just sleep for like an hour, and then came back and I was just like, there's a photo of me and I just look
Oh God.
wrecked.
That's my biggest fear, and
Right?
I can't think of. I'm sure it might have happened here, but nothing's coming to mind, so it couldn't have been too bad. But that's my biggest fear, and I don't know how it hasn't happened. I guess you're just so on, especially with
You
the
wash-
lack of sleep.
I mean, I wash my hands almost
Yeah,
constantly, and
yeah.
I'm super conscious of it. And then, and there was one year before Emerald City, the night before I got on my plane, my stomach was a disaster.
Oh God, that's my biggest fear.
And then I had a fever on the flight out.
Ah.
Like I felt myself, like I sweat through my hoodie, and I felt the fever break on the plane.
Oh.
So I was good, but it was scary. Like I have this
Yeah.
flight, I gotta go.
yeah,
And it could have been a real bad
it's
weekend.
already like not the most fun experience traveling. You know,
Yeah.
that's just there's nothing worse.
Yeah, so I'm about to embark
Yeah.
on 2 weekends back to back, and I'm good so far.
I
And,
just
Stock
I think
up on
you,
vitamin C.
Yeah, I was
Fine.
gonna say you learn what signs your body has. I think,
Yeah.
and you kind of like react to them. Like if I just overdose on orange juice and like just knock myself out and sleep, or I take a emergency. And everyone says that's a placebo, but that it works great for me. So if it's a placebo, I love it.
I just try to eat. I try to eat
That too.
vegetables once. Like I try to
Fruit
not just
for me.
eat junk.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to because I
Yeah.
love junk.
But that makes the difference, and especially
yeah.
that's one of the worst parts of like being on the road. It's like a lot of the guys that I'm with are on diets or stuff like that, or they're like finding like specialty food. They have to break their diets all the time, and you're working at weird hours. You're stopping at truck stop. It's
Right.
almost impossible to eat well, and then that definitely contributes to things.
Yeah, that's something Steph and I were talking about on this most recent trip, because we've almost like we've radically shifted our eating habits, but we've definitely been eating differently, where we've really been limiting the carbs. And when we do have carbs, we try to make them good carbs. But the biggest thing, and this is the most fundamental shift, is just moving away from that idea that, a well-balanced meal has to have, a protein, a starch, and a
Yeah.
vegetable. Cutting that starch out, and it's really made a big difference. And after a while, you get used to it. But it's like anywhere you go, either the meal is carb-centric, or if it's not carb-centric, there's something on there.
Right.
So yeah, it can be really
very
tricky.
hard.
You know?
And it messes with your body too when you first start switching those types of things. Like
Yeah.
if you just do it suddenly, like, especially on the road or something, it's not good.
Yeah, the one thing I don't do when I'm traveling is working out. I almost never work out.
No.
Yeah.
There's no time. Like to go to the hotel gym, I'd have to wake up at 6 in the
Yeah,
morning.
you're already
It
getting
just-
up so early and you're going to bed so late.
Yeah.
And a lot of my guys are gym rats, and like I just don't know how they do it. Like, I'm
Like
going to
Saab?
the gym. Yeah, like Saab. Oh my god.
I mean, I would love to be
He's
able
the
to
worst
fit in
of
like
them.
a 30-minute stationary bike ride, just because it does like your energy sort of gets
Yeah,
ramped.
but
But
like who has time for?
yeah,
For a convention, it's tough. For the work trips, I'm usually able to at least get one in.
Sure.
Because it's not as demanding. It's not like you have to be in line at, the
Right,
crack
right.
of dawn.
Yeah.
But eating right and exercising and getting enough rest, especially for conventions. I mean, you feel like you barely sleep.
the rest is
rest
hard to
doesn't
do.
happen.
Yeah, the rest is hard to do.
You
If
catch
you're-
up like the day you get home or something.
and
It's
if
just
you're-
impossible.
If you're sharing the room with somebody that snores,
Oh,
you're just
oh
not-
my god!
you're
so
screwed.
one of my guys like he snores like violently,
Yeah.
and I guess once I fall asleep, I'm just out cold, and I don't notice it. But I've had a couple new guys with me like switching them out, and like Brian O'Day, he like he was like, I'm gonna kill you. Like I didn't sleep last night. Like not me, I don't snore
Right.
apparently, but the other guy, and they're noticing it hardcore, and that's a big problem.
It's really, I mean, I have this weird thing with me where if there are people in the room, I will be the last one to fall asleep. Like,
Yeah,
I just
me
have
too.
to be
Me
the
too.
last one. And if somebody's snoring, then I can't fall asleep. So there are times where I'll go to the room early and try and fall asleep before everybody gets back, because I know if I'm asleep before the snorer shows up, there's a good chance I'll make it. But sometimes they snore loud enough that it actually wakes me up.
I've straight up like stopped working with certain people just because like they just you can't sleep with them, and
it's
I'm
really-
like worried for them, like they're gonna die.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
it
tough.
sounds like they're gonna die. I wake up, I'm like, oh my god, is he like?
I have 10 hour audio file of just white noise on my iPod now. So if I have to, I just crank that up and it's like.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, that is smart.
And sometimes the snoring is still loud, but at least I'm kind of drowning. But then you have to sleep with earbuds, and that's
Yeah.
you're not really asleep ever.
How many guys do you fit in a room?
Depending on the show, between 3 and 5. I have 2 guys that love to sleep on the floor for some reason, even when there's beds. They're just, we will generally split, queen beds, 2 guys, and
If
then
my
a
back
guy
is
on the floor.
particularly janky, I'll sleep on the floor.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe
if I'm
that's
feeling
what it
real
is.
tight, I'll just-
One of the guys always sleeps on the floor, and we only had 2 people or 3 people with us one night, so he slept in the bed. And then like the whole week, he's like, my back and my neck, I can't. And I'm like, how does this make any sense? but yeah, so we cram them in because the costs are just insane. There's some hotels weekends that are like $1,000, and like you can't have 2 rooms, But so the bigger the show, the more people we're cramming in there. You bring an air mattress, or we make it work. You don't really know a person until you share a van with them or a room, or you really learn the ins and outs of everybody you may have known your whole life. You don't truly know them. So
That's true.
it's weird. And a lot of you always start getting little arguments and infighting, and it's like being in a band or a family or something,
Oh, it's very much that road. You hear comedians talk about, or bands talk about. It's all the same. Like
whatever you're doing, you're doing the same.
Sometimes it's a freaking blast when you're in a room with good people and
Oh, yeah.
and like you're not falling asleep because somebody cracks a joke and everybody starts laughing.
Oh, dude, it happens
And, like,
constantly.
you- like,
That's
you
the
know-
best. That's when it's fun. Or
Yeah.
good conversations in the van. It can make a 20-hour trip feel like 2, or it
Right.
can make it feel like 40. I always feel bad for like the random family that just happens to be staying in the hotel when like these events are going on, because they just look so confused, and like you're like, what the hell is going on?
Kind of on that note, that reminds me. So that Ohio trip for the wedding, some timing. We were staying at the hotel at the same time that this soccer conference
Yeah,
was
there's
in
always
town,
something else.
and the hotel was just overrun by these little kids, and one of the elevators wasn't working, and it was like it took forever to get up and down, and these kids were running around all over the place. But I mean, kind of to that point of the camaraderie of a road trip, or just being away in general, no disrespect to Columbus, probably wouldn't be number 1 on my list of vacation destinations.
No.
But I was there for the wedding and to support my friend. There were a bunch of other guys who were groomsmen. We all went to high school together. And these are people who, when I see them, it's, once or twice a year at most, and rarely are we all together. So to be together like that for a sustained amount of time, like, it was great.
Yeah. And I think as you get older in your life, like if it wasn't for these things that we're tied to, like it's not that you fall out with people. You know how it is. Like you might not see someone for 6 months, and it's no ill will towards either person, but these kind of force you to still see your friends and things like that. And I think that's what keeps me going. Like when you're like, why the hell am I doing this? Like an endless amount of work, blah, blah, but like you get to hang out with your friends at the end of the day and work with them, and it affords you some things that a normal person wouldn't get to do,
Yeah, it's weird. Like, this podcast, it's not that I wouldn't talk to people
No, but same thing,
otherwise,
right? Yeah.
but it kind of is like it's been, I'm not saying an excuse,
you
but an
connected.
opportunity
You're
to
talking about
get together.
You're starting to sound a bit like Rich Roney talking about the friendships that have been formed.
Oh, the friendship and fun?
Yeah, the fun and friendship that has been formed over the course of the shows or the podcast or what have you.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
been a lot of friendship and fun.
A lot of friendships and fun.
It's all life's about stories, right? That's how I am, I think. And like those are the things, like the podcast. Oh, remember when we did that podcast and this happened, or remember that trip to wherever? And I love that. And when you're 80 years old and you're gonna look back, those are the things you're gonna remember. So anything that assists with that is cool, I guess.
Thank you for listening, and until next time, just keep punching.